Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lauren Dixon, Apra Talks host.
Good morning. Hope everybody had a lovely breakfast. I told myself I was going to get a yogurt and ended up with a whole plate of bacon. Well, good morning and welcome to Apra Talks, Innovating Change at Prospect Development 2015, sponsored by Wealth Engine. My name is Lauren Dixon and I will be the host this morning. New Orleans, the Crescent City, the Big Easy, the city that care forgot. A melting pot of French, Spanish, African, Cajun, and Creole. The birthplace of jazz and home to a rich culture of joie de vivre. New Orleans is easily one of the most fascinating and unique cities in the world. And where better to talk about change? Change unanticipated, incremental change, change yet unrealized. Change surrounds us each day, but do we always recognize it for what it is and for the opportunities it may provide us? Today we will spotlight 3 speakers who will discuss how innovation serves as a tool that leads us through change. And then we'll gather with our industry peers for a targeted roundtable discussion. Laissez les bon temps rouler. Woo! After the presentations this morning, you'll each have an opportunity to reflect on the remarks that you heard with colleagues at your table in a fashion well suited to our New Orleans venue. At each table, there is one chair with a mask taped underneath. Whoever is sitting at that chair will be the table host. Feel free to wear the mask. Go ahead and take a look. If you're not comfortable being the table host, just ask someone else at the table to step in. There are also numerous beads of different colors at the table, and those beads correspond to a set of questions. The masks are very popular. Who has one on? It's very bright up here. As you respond to the questions, write down your answers and give them to a roaming tweeter or ask someone at your table to tweet the ideas. If you haven't finished your discussion at the end of the session, no worries. The Apra Talk speakers will be available in the Louisiana Gallery 4 from 10:30 until noon to continue the conversation. We'll also have volunteers who will visit with each table and tweet takeaways from the discussion. You can help us make this activity even more successful by adding your own tweets to the conversation. Simply use the hashtag APRAPD2015. Now allow me to introduce the first Apra Talk of the day, Greg Lambusi of the Louisiana State Museum. Greg will touch on how Hurricane Katrina thrust incredible change upon the professional and personal lives of those working and living in New Orleans. As business came to a halt and individuals faced rebuilding their lives, nonprofits had to reassess strategy and quickly acclimate to new circumstances. Some nonprofits never recovered, but others have thrived, adapting to change and finding new sources of funding. Greg will explore how to handle change when it's forced upon you and how to flourish when faced with adversity. Greg is currently the Director of Exhibits and Interpretive Services at the Louisiana State Museum, developing exhibits and interpretation of historic sites across the state. In the last 12 years, as Director of Collections, he has focused on expanding the music holdings of the museum by collecting a wide variety of artifacts related to jazz and other musical forms, and developed the first operational plan for the New Orleans Mint Performing Arts Center. Please join me in welcoming Greg Lambusi.
Hello. I hope everybody's enjoying their time in New Orleans and enjoying the conference. I'm going to talk a bit about, change being thrust upon us and nonprofits and museums. And I'm going to come to it from a museum angle. That's what I know best. And in our experiences dealing with Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And it's really hard to believe that it's been 10 years now since those storms came to New Orleans. And at the time, we had just prepared the year before for a hurricane, and we usually board up all of the buildings, move all the artifacts into central locations within the buildings. We have 9 historic properties in the French Quarter, and our collections are well over 500,000 artifacts. And it's difficult. It's impossible to be able to evacuate all of those collections in the face of a storm. There's just not enough time. And so we prepared the buildings and then evacuate our families. We did that for Katrina, and our staff ended up being scattered all over the country. We had difficulty locating staff after the storm. It was such a catastrophic event. Infrastructure was destroyed throughout New Orleans, throughout this region, throughout coastal Louisiana and Mississippi, and then shortly after that, Rita came along and also impacted coastal Texas and re-damaged or further damaged coastal Louisiana. So it was a major catastrophic event. Housing was damaged throughout the region. People had difficulty. People lost their homes, and it was difficult to communicate. There was no power for over a month in most areas. Cell towers were down, and it was difficult to get gas, all of these things. So nonprofits, like other organizations, had difficulty contacting their staff. Those folks who lost their homes, many of them decided to move to other areas, and often the missions or the goals of those, the programmatic goals of those nonprofits no longer existed because the very things that they worked for no longer existed. So it necessitated a whole new economy grew out of it, and that economy was one of recovery. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did with the museum and our nonprofit, our Louisiana Museum Foundation, and use that as an example of how a nonprofit was able to survive and then ultimately thrive. After we evacuated, we began trying to locate staff, and it was very difficult with, as I mentioned, the cell situation, and we had people scattered all over the country. We were able to assemble a small staff, and because we had state police, because our museum is secured by state police, we were able to make it back into the city shortly after. We had minimal damage, really, compared to other institutions, but we did have damage to the old U.S. Mint building, which is our largest historic site in the French Quarter. And we had roof damage. Fortunately, the collection areas and the exhibit areas were untouched, but the building was damaged enough to where we had to evacuate the exhibits and collections from it. So, and one of the difficulties we had, and this was true of most organizations, is that, of course, I wanted to get a large generator, one of those truck-sized generators to power the Mint, but of course those were going to hospitals, to essential relief organizations, and so things like that were very difficult to come by, and getting gas, et cetera. But we were able to go in, assess the situation, bring out key artifacts, and move those to Baton Rouge. We set up a location, a base in Baton Rouge to work from. And this was also a place where our foundation could also work from. And one of the difficulties they had was, like the museum, was contacting their board, contacting their staff. Their board were scattered all over the country also. And they were also faced with having to change their programmatic goals. And our foundation, Louisiana Museum Foundation, was fortunate to receive grants from NEH and other emergency grants from NEH, National Endowment for Humanities, and other organizations to begin relief operations. And in the early days, it's just attempting to pull staff together and just make it from week to week on a human level. And but after a month or so, after power came back on, we were assessing how best to care for damage first, and how to reorganize, and to move. We ended up moving the collections out after the power came on, and that became the major focus of the museum and the Louisiana Museum Foundation. We, after much searching and competing with other organizations, located a temporary storage facility in Baton Rouge and moved over 200,000 artifacts and all of our exhibits to Baton Rouge. And that was with help from our foundation to locate grants to pay for this move. And then as time went on, the foundation was able to continue its operations because it was bringing in these grants and focusing on the rehabilitation of the mint and bringing the collections back to the mint. In the early days, we had to rapidly move the collections, and we were able to hire staff from local institutions that had closed. And once it really took about 2 years for us to write the grants, receive the grants, and then prepare for the move back to the mint and all the rehabilitation that had to go into the mint. Once we moved back, we improved collection storage, exhibit spaces, and at the time, money was flowing right after Katrina, and a lot of federal monies were being pumped in, and we were able to secure monies to build a new state-of-the-art performance facility, and our foundation was instrumental in gaining those grants, and really the nonprofits that small nonprofits had difficulty surviving, and with a small staff, people's homes being destroyed, it was more than likely that they would not survive. The ones that were associated with a governmental agency, with federal government or state government, had a greater likelihood of surviving, and also organizations that had other locations in other cities that were geographically diversified, I guess, and there were also many international relief agencies that were coming in and helping either their branches or smaller nonprofits to rather I should say many nonprofits. There was a void that was created, and many nonprofits were created in that void, and those many of those have since are no longer existing because the very need for which they were created no longer exists. But I did want to say that the nonprofits that were most likely to survive had a geographical diversification, were part of larger organizations with multiple locations, or were associated in some way with federal or state government. And that was kind of my main thing that I wanted to say, was that diversification is very important. And also, it's important to have at least a year's operational budget in the bank. And because if there's a catastrophic event that really wipes out a whole region, it's difficult to make it if you don't have enough operational funds to last throughout the year. So Thank you for my time. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Many thanks to Greg for kicking off the day with a change without choice talk. With her Apra talk, Jennifer McCormick will tell the story of how she and a few pioneering colleagues helped to build the analytics program at the University of Washington, and how communication, curiosity, perseverance, and a strong entrepreneurial attitude are essential traits to facilitate change. Dr. Jennifer McCormick is the Associate Director of Advancement Analytics at the University of Washington, Seattle, where she is responsible for supporting the university's fundraising efforts by providing data-driven insights and strategy. Several years ago, during her tenure as Associate Director of Advancement Research, she began building the University of Washington's analytics capacity and implementation that has now been transformed into an official unit at the university. Jennifer has presented on topics related to prospect research, analytics, and professional development at Apra, NDOA, NDSA, and CASE. She received her bachelor's degree from SUNY Stony Brook and her doctorate in anthropology from Yale University. She serves on the board of directors for Apra, where she is currently serving as president-elect, and we're all very proud of her. Please welcome Jennifer McCormick.
Oh, it's on. Hey! Get that over with so I feel comfortable up here. This is a great honor it was a great honor to be asked to be up here. I feel like I'm talking really loud. When Misa called and had the conversation with me, would I be interested in talking about change? And it's something that I'm really passionate about and very excited about. So when given the opportunity, I jumped on it. And then spent months thinking about what that actually meant, because I'd never actually gone back and thought about what had happened over the past 5-6 years at the University of Washington. Not in a kind of introspective way on how we moved that change, because for years we were really in that process. Everything was a moment of change for me and for the people who are working to make analytics happen at the University of Washington. So today I want to talk about how you can innovate change from within your organization, no matter where you are on the org chart. And I'm going to talk about it in the framework of how we did that at the University of Washington. And I want to start with a concept of this idea of what is the greatest challenge to change. And when I thought about this carefully, about through the years, what were some of the challenges for us as we were trying to innovate and move forward and move our organization forward, and what I realized that for us, and it still continues, is that the greatest challenge to change is experience. And oftentimes great experiences are often the worst enemy for change. And I'm going to talk about that kind of conceptually, but also in the context of the work that we did. So when I'm talking about change and the threat with the experience, change is actually really hard. I know it's hard for me. It was actually hard for me to make the full transition into analytics. Even after years of doing it, there was a little bit of fear. Was I making the right move? And was I going to get fired after a year for completely failing? All these things come into your mind. And you start empathizing when you're thinking about change. And when you're an agent of change, when you're in that moment, you're not necessarily thinking about the people who you're actually impacting, the people who are receiving this. And change is really very emotional, because change has to have meaning for you. You have to identify with it. And one of the biggest things is that with change, the biggest question is this going to help me, or is this going to hinder me? And certainly with analytics, especially when in an organization where you're just starting to onboard this, for a lot of fundraisers, and I talk about this with fundraisers because that's really where we made a lot of progress over the past 5 years in buy-in. It is very hard because you're asking them to change a process that may have worked for them, but we're asking them to trust us that this is really going to help them and that we have their backs. So I want to start off from the very beginning at the University of Washington about 5-6 years ago. And a small group of us that from the prospect development side, from annual fund, from alumni association, and from information management and reporting, were very interested in how we could raise the profile of analytics at the University of Washington. And we really wanted to have a thoughtful conversation about this and start thinking, what are ways that we can help do this? And what is it going to take to not only raise the profile of analytics, but also provide a proof of concept that would give leadership cause to finally fully invest in this? And this was, we understood a little bit at the time, but not really realizing what it meant, that this was possibly a big culture change, and that's really what it is. So we start anyway, and this is kind of where, this is really the fun part, where we're having these great conversations about what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, and it was very exciting. And we finally decide we need to stop talking kind of theoretically about how this was going to happen. We were just going to actually have to do it. We were going to have to decide what was our first project together as a group. And we decide on, we finally decide, we cross that Rubicon and say we're just going to do a plan-giving model. And just as an aside, if you're going to do proof of concept on the value of analytics, you may not want to do a bequest model first, because it probably will take about 10 years for you to see results on that, and by then most of those fundraisers will have been gone. Except for us in prospect development, because we're so loyal, right? So, but anyway, it's kind of like we decide to do this, and we don't really know how it's going to work, but we know we have a great network of peers who were just starting to do this as well, and peers who are quite advanced. And so we were really relying on that and talking a lot to these people. And many of these people you see here today, many of them, if you were at the analytics symposium, you saw there as well. So it's kind of like the Montessori method. We're just going to, you were walking into the room, we're going to play with something and learn that way, and we'll figure this stuff out. And that stuff was the plan-giving model, and that stuff was analytics. And it took us a while, of course, because we also have full-time positions that we need to prioritize. But we get this done in about 6 months. And we really worked hard, and we came to understand a lot of interesting things, because the other thing about change and innovation is it kind of has a cascade effect. You start working on one thing, and then another thing changes, and all of a sudden you have a whole different idea. And for us, it was a different perspective on our own data, and what were some of the challenges there, and what are some of the things that we needed to do and do better. So that was really interesting. So we have this plan-giving model, and we're just, it's kind of rookies. We're like Wild West, guns a-blazing. We decide to have this meeting with the director of plan giving and also the VP of individual giving programs, who's actually here today. And we go in there with this PowerPoint presentation that when I look back on this, I wish I really had it to show you some of these slides, because it was ridiculous. Because we were so excited about the new language that we're adopting and these new concepts that we're learning that we just want to throw it all out there. We're ripping off the hood. And we're going to show, people who really have never been part of this conversation what this was all about, with actually not even talking about why we were doing this, what kind of solution we were providing. We actually never really asked, how can we help you? What are your challenges? And we want to try to provide those solutions for you. And that was the first mistake we made. But I always believe that you make mistakes early and you make them often, and it's a faster road to success, because change is really slow. So making mistakes early on in the process is really valuable. And so we go through this, and it's interesting, but of course we're getting stuck on details, and we might be intimidating a little bit, maybe not inspiring as much as we wanted to do, and we were certainly confusing. And one of the things that we understood, I think, afterwards is that we had an idea of this solution, that we knew what we were doing, and this was going to be a good thing for everybody. I remember one thing we mentioned was, well, with this you can actually, we know you do annual mailings, and these are postcards that are sent out through plan giving, and that this is a great way to segment that, use this as a strategy. And immediately the director of plan giving said, well, we can mail to whoever we want. We don't need to, we can mail to everybody. And we didn't really have an answer to that, because what is the answer? Like, oh, well, we can't help you. If a budget is not a restraint, then what do we do this for? And so we went back to the drawing board, understanding that communication was actually more important than the engineering of models and learning the statistics and everything that goes into that. And we were trying to figure out, well, how is this going to work? Because we really need to get people to buy into this and really get excited about it. And one thing, because I work very much in the major gift world side of things, is that as we were preparing for the next campaign, we knew from units that as they were deciding on their goals for the next campaign, that plan giving was going to play a larger percentage of the goals. And how was that going to happen? And one of the ways we thought we could do to help plan giving, and that plan giving at the University of Washington is a central unit like we are in prospect development, is they also have to have the conversations with these units about who their plan giving prospects are and how they can actually, what can they do? And we thought, well, if we could flag people in portfolios who also show a high likelihood to make a bequest, this is a great conversation that plan giving can have with major gift fundraisers. And not just in their portfolios to say, you may also want to think about a plan giving conversation because we know that they should be, but also in prospect pools. And this is what really started to stick and resonate with them. Another thing I might add too with change and going back to this concept of experience is that you also have to understand the way they do business and what they are familiar and comfortable with. And in plan giving, they have tried and true variables that are very well trusted, and I think we know many of them: loyalty, giving 15 out of 20 years, whether or not you have children, multiple properties. These things are the common language in plan giving when they're looking at prospects, and we started introducing new things that they never thought about. And that was a very uncomfortable moment because it kept going back and asking, well, why is this here? Why are these variables in there? And so we really realized that we had to start speaking more the language in order to make a shift, to speak our own and get them comfortable with that. But things started being, we're starting to gain a little bit of momentum, and we go on to build more models in-house. But I think the real rubber hit the road a couple of years later during the course of a comprehensive screening, and we contract with a vendor, and they help us, and they build a major gift model. And we have to roll this out to all these units, and it's really important that we keep them focused on the people who are not only highest capacity, but also we want to make sure out of thousands that they're focusing on the people who have a high likelihood to give. Because in an organization, some schools have almost 10,000 prospects in their pool, and they have a very finite amount of time in the discovery process. And so we really have to nail this, and we have to do a good job, and we also have to make sure that they trust us. And so we go forward, we know we have to do better storytelling, and we have to use anecdotes. We have to reach out to peers and get their success stories. So as you're innovating, as you're changing, you may not have your stories of success yet, but other people do, and you really need to rely on that. So reach out, you always should, and get those. And we did get a few. And we were telling these stories, and we were actually introducing better visualizations that made the data that we were presenting and the insights a lot more catchy and eye-popping, that they would focus on that and not get caught in the weeds. And one of the things that we did was we just simply showed a table that we just used colors on. And we actually used purple and gold because we're Huskies. And the people who were highly rated and people who had a high inclination, according to this model, we just banded in gold because we wanted people to look at this. And at the time, our vice president of constituency programs, who manages all the chief advancement officers across units, was joining us on all of this. And the great thing about him is that he doesn't need to understand the details of this, but he was sold on it. He really knew the value of this, and he was supporting us. And he sees these reports as we're going through them, and he's really excited, and he starts branding this, and he calls it the gold zone. And every people in my organization know this. And we didn't do this. He did this. He just said, this is the gold zone. And every meeting we went into, you have to focus on the gold zone. That's where you don't look at anything else, the gold zone. And it became the language all of a sudden, the gold zone, that people even today, years later, will call and say, I just want to see my prospects in the gold zone. And this wasn't something that we did, and this was an advocate who was catching on to the work that we were doing and starting to use his own language, and then all of a sudden it starts broadening out to everybody else. And Alison Somerset, she gave an amazing talk many months ago at Drive about change, and she talks about the language landscape and shifting people into your language and making them feel comfortable with it. More important, giving them ownership over that. That's the language landscape, and that's really what we were doing. So people, later on, people were talking about RFM. People speak about this really naturally. And that's a real culture change, and that's really the most important thing, because you can innovate, you can create all these amazing analytics that really do have the potential to provide incredible solutions, but they don't really, you won't get any traction unless you make that connection. And speaking on advocates too, they are really important. We couldn't do this alone. I couldn't do this alone, and I had a lot of help, and even today, I am a team of two, myself and Baron Cato. And we can't get out to all the units and try to onboard them with what we're doing and the value. We actually, some of the best people who do that for us are our colleagues in prospect research and relationship management. And when you think about analytics, relationship management, and prospect research and relationship management, they're out there all the time. They're sitting down with fundraisers every week, and they're having conversations, and they're doing portfolio reviews, they're making recommendations, and they really know these fundraisers in some very personal ways, and they understand the fears, the idiosyncrasies, the concerns, but they're able to continue to educate them when we can't, and they know them better in many ways than we do. And it's not that we don't get out or that we don't want to, we just can't right now. And so your advocates, you have to find them. Some people in the corporate world might call them evangelists, which I really don't like. But they're vital, and you have to recognize who your advocates are, because they're going to play a great role, because you can't change everything on your own. And so we have a lot of advocates now. It started in prospect research and relationship management, and then executive leadership, and now fundraisers talk this language. And it's really a wonderful moment of change. And I remember a few weeks ago, and going back to Plan Giving, I got a email from the director of Plan Giving and asking, tell me about they're going to start their first survey ever, and they're going to put this out in winter. And when we think about, last time when they talked about the postcards they could send to anyone, and she said, I can only send the surveys out to 40,000 people, and I really need your help. And we really need to find how analytics is going to help us. And that, at that moment, it was just amazing to me, because I remember that conversation many years ago, and I thought, we're here, wow. We're actually, people see the value of it, and not just that. They're used to it. They're comfortable with it now, and they know, again, that we have their back. And remember that with change. You have to assure people all the time that you have their back, that you're doing something for them that's going to help them. And that's really about empathy, and it's really about trust. And it's taking experience now that could be the enemy and using it as an ally, kind of like a gravity assist, where you're using their experience to kind of launch off in a new direction and accelerate, rather than fight it and crash and make things harder for you. So that's a really important point. And so I think that's where I'm kind of ending, but I think using empathy and trust as fuel for change is just as important as the way you innovate yourself and learn. So thank you, everybody. This has been great being up here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, David Robertson will share his insights into the future of the prospect development profession, since prospect development has continually evolved since the founding of Apra in 1987. The growth of our profession has been a long, winding road. What detours, roadblocks, and hitchhikers will we encounter as we continue into the future? And the old tools and maps aren't going to work, so we must prepare to adapt and to change. David is the Director of Operations Research at Syracuse University. His area of expertise is data mining, forecasting, and predictive modeling. He continues to present statistical methods and modeling at Apra, CASE, NEDRA, and MARC conferences across the US and Canada. He is currently a doctoral student in the Social Sciences PhD program within the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. His research examines the unrecognized and informal charitable contributions of the underrepresented, focusing on the philanthropic activities of the disenfranchised and marginalized members of our society. Please help me welcome David Robertson.
All right, well, thank you. That's my fan club. So I walk back and forth, so you're probably best looking at me and not over here. Might make you sick. So about 6 months ago, Amy Carrier gave me a call and said, Dave, we would like you to speak at Apra this year, and we're in New Orleans. And I said, well, I can do that. And then she said, well, we would like you to talk about where we're going to be 10 years from now in prospect research and philanthropy. And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. And then she said, well, you got 14 minutes to do it. And I said, well, I can do that. And then she said, well, we also would like you to sing a song. And I said, well, I can do that. And then I said to her, well, Apra's going to pay for this, right? They're going to pay for my hotel and the conference and, kind of help me out. And she said, no, we're not going to do that. And then I said, well, Syracuse University can do that. And then about a week later, I got a phone call from Patty Woodford in Rochester. She said, Dave, if you're going to speak at Apra, would you wear our T-shirt, our local chapter T-shirt? And I said, I can do that. So I'm going to sing a song. Is that okay? Okay. It takes me a little time to get set up here. So this is a song I wrote with a little help, just a little help, from a guy named Neil Young. And but I changed the words, and and this works out really well with Jennifer's talk about, what did you call it? The gold zone. And so this song I've titled, Searching for Prospect Gold. And I don't guarantee anything. Sorry, they switched me over. So this is called Searching for Prospect Gold. I want to live, I want to give. I am a miner for that prospect gold. It's these expressions I never give that keeps me searching for that prospect gold. Hey, you never know. I've searched in Hollywood, I've searched in Redwood, I've searched the ocean for a heart of gold. It's these expressions I never give that keeps me searching for this prospect gold. Hey, you never know. Keep me searching for that prospect gold. Keep me searching and I'm growing old. Keep me searching for that prospect gold. I am a miner for that prospect gold. Oh. All right. Thank you. Well, that was fun. I think I made one mistake, and that's okay. So where we're going to be 10 years from now, I have no clue. So what I did is I sent out a survey. I think I sent it out to probably 20, I think it was 27 institutions. And there was no particular search. I just sent it out to 27 individuals that I knew who worked at 27 different institutions. And I didn't ask these 4 questions, but this is kind of what I was looking for. Before we can understand where we're going to be 10 years from now, I think it's important to understand where we are now. And so who are we, right? And I'll present some of the findings. And through these findings, we understood, we kind of got an idea of who we are now, right? Where do we come from? What's our educational background? What are our hopes and dreams? Who we are right now, okay? But also, what I was looking for is, what should we do now? I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I have no idea where we're going to be 10 years from now, right? When I started Syracuse University 13 years ago now, if somebody would have said, where do you think you're going to be 10 years from now? I would have no clue. I have no idea. I didn't even know if I'd be working there. But I was more interested in what I was doing then and what I needed to do to get to wherever I wanted to go. Not where I was going to end up, but where I wanted to go. And that was important. I think that's what we need to do. And that's kind of the focus of my presentation is, what should we do now to present, to make sure we're in a position to be where we want to be 10 years from now. And so some of the survey results came back, and these are very general conclusions, but we're not going to be where we are now, that's for sure. We can almost see that sea change happening. And when I say a sea change happening, I come from a quantitative perspective, right? And I can see, and I'm comparing my position to my prospect researchers, my colleagues that I work with. And we can see that we're already getting out of the basement. At least we are, which was a big move for Syracuse University, to actually extract us physically from the basement and move us upstairs into the main suite. We're also seeing, and I think what we're going to see, and the survey results confirm this, that this whole idea of quantitative and qualitative, right? The statistical analysis going on and the qualitative bios that are going on and the narratives that are being written, those are going to merge into one. At least that's what the survey results are saying. And I think we can almost see that happening now. And also, we're going to get out of this perspective as that we're just researchers, that we're just sitting in our cubes, right, and we're doing research, right? We're becoming more and more, we're asked more and more to do analytical. And when I say analytics, I'm saying to give more perspective, right, on what we see. Right? We're just not regurgitating things that we're finding on LexisNexis or whatever tools that we use. We're now being asked, or we think, and we're hoping that this is going to explode, right? Hopefully it's exponential, that we're going to be asked more and more about our opinion. What do we think is happening? So, and I have to agree with some of those results, that we're becoming more and more analysts in what we're doing, right? Our opinion matters more and more. And so what do we need to do to make that trend continue to happen? And I think this is very important. We have to be the driver of our profession. We can't be driven. We can't be pulled along. We have to, I know we have many sponsors here today. It's important that we have an input into the direction that the sponsors go, right? We want to make sure that our input affects what they're going to be doing, not what they're doing that's going to affect us. We want to be the drivers of this profession, not the driven. I think that's important because 10 years is going to come, right? 10 years down the road is going to come, and who knows where we're going to be. And all I'm saying today is we have a choice of where we're going to be. I have this in my office, and it's a poster that my son gave me for Father's Day. And he knows me so well that I'm not like the others. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what Syracuse University thinks of me. I'm still employed as far as I know. They know that my modeling seems to work, and so they leave me alone. And I'm so happy that I love what I do. I love just about everything that I do, from a personal standpoint to my job. I tend to be a very creative person, and so I always say I'm always hanging out at the margins, right? I'm always looking at, in statistical analysis, if we're true statisticians, what we should be interested in is not what's falling in the middle of the bell curve, but those deviations that are falling outside the bell curve. That's where the analysis happens. That's where the interesting stories are. Why isn't someone following the norm? Let's understand those deviations. And I think by understanding those deviations and applying tools and coming up with tools that we create, that's where the creativity is. And that's where I want to be 10 years down the road. I want to understand, okay, what's the next question, and what can I do in a unique way that's going to help me understand that question? What can I do that's different than anybody else that's going to... And again, I'm not looking for bizarre things here. I'm just saying, what's my perspective? I guess that's what I'm saying. What's my perspective in my job? Am I just doing the same thing every day, or am I looking at things differently? And I love Apra, but one of the best conferences I've ever been to, and again, I'm a statistician, so I'm coming from a quantitative standpoint. One of the best conferences I went to, it has nothing to do with where it was, Las Vegas, but one of the best conferences I ever went to was put on by a company called SPSS. And it wasn't because SPSS was putting it on, it was who was there at the conference. It wasn't just the nonprofit, it was the for-profit people that were there. It was the pharmaceutical companies, it was the automotive companies, it was the steel companies, and they were all asking the same question. They wanted to know forecasting. And so so I went to these sessions, and they were looking at they're doing the same exact thing we're doing, right? They're marketing people as well. They're looking for a customer base. And so they were using tools, and they were asking questions that normally we don't ask, because we seem to be in a mindset of the nonprofit. And so it introduced to me, it showed me that what we're doing, yes, we're not making penicillin, we're not building space shuttle wings, but we're all doing the same thing. We're forecasting for something, and they're getting, and we need to look at what they're doing. We need to be the girl on the right, right? Has anyone seen this slide before? I just saw it a week ago. I thought it was so perfect. I think we've been the girls on the left for too long. I think the girl on the right has it right, in that she has a unique perspective on what's going on in that moment, right? And I think she's doing that for herself. We have to make sure that what we do, and how we grow is number one for us. If we're comfortable with what we're doing in our growth, right, then the institution we're working for will benefit. So I think that's important. The number one, we have to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. You know, are we just going to work every day and doing the same thing, or are we looking for new methods? Are we asking questions, right? We have to become what I call creative experts, right? We're experts. People come to us because we know what we're doing. But I'm adding this word creative because I want to be a creative expert, right? We need to look beyond our industry. When I started 13 years ago, and this is my guess, when I started 13 years ago, there was probably a 10 to a 15-year gap between what we were doing and what the for-profit world was doing in the way of forecasting. And so when Linda Bennett hired me so many years ago, she said, Dave, can you do predictive modeling? And I was out of work, and I just got laid off. 1,200 of us just got laid off at Philips Electronics, and I did forecasting for them. And she said, Dave, can you do predictive modeling? And I wanted to get at SU because I wanted to continue my degree. I didn't know what predictive modeling was, but I said, sure, I can do that, because it sounded like forecasting. And so 13 years ago, Linda Bennett had the foresight to know that predictive modeling was going to be a thing that we needed to look at. And so there was like I said, about a 15 to a 10-year gap between the for-profit world and the nonprofit world. And what the for-profit world was doing, right, we were going to be doing probably 10 years down the road. That gap has closed. We're doing some pretty sophisticated things now, right? That gap is closed. But I still think what we need to do is we need to look at what's the for-profit world doing in the way of forecasting, in the way of research, consumer research, what tools are they using, and how can we take those tools and that knowledge and apply it to finding prospects. I think we need to remain open. We can't have closed minds. We have to remain open to possibilities, right? Sometimes I'm very quick to say we can't do that. And I have found that I'm better off either not saying anything or listening, right? I'm so eager to say, okay, this is what I've done in the past, and yes, what you're asking for falls in line with what I've done in the past, so yeah, I can do that. But if you're asking for something that's a little bit different, maybe to use some variables or to do something that's a little bit different than what I've used and done in the past, then maybe I'm too eager to, even if I don't say it out loud, I'm kind of closing it off. And I think we need to remain open. I think we need to remain neutral and listen to what is being asked of us and give it some thought and say, okay, what is available? Maybe we can do it that way. Maybe we can use that type of variable. Maybe yes, this is not how I've done it in the past, but let's try that. And again, it's constant learning. And I think, and again, we need to trust ourselves. We have to look at each request, each moment in that particular moment. It's good to look where we're going to be 10 years down the road. But I think but the question is, where do I want to be 10 years down the road? And each moment that we have, and each decision that we make, and the energy that we're putting out is leading us in some sort of direction. And it's a direction where we're the drivers and not the driven. But we also have to know our limitations, right? I'm asked more and more to retrieve data. I don't consider myself a data retriever. I would like to consider myself more of an analyst than a data retriever. But my job has made me, if I want the data quicker, I need to be a data retriever. And so, although a lot of times, and so in that case, I am saying, okay, I will do that. But there are some cases where you're asking me to do something that's not my job. And so it's okay to say no. But it's also okay to say yes. And I think it's wise and it's prudent to be vocal, to understand what's going on, and to have an opinion. I know sometimes I tend to, because I sit at the margins, I tend to just listen. And I think it's okay to express an opinion. And I think it's okay to put yourself out there and maybe become someone that's a little bit more vocal than you actually are, maybe in your personality. Because again, that's a way of being the driver instead of being the driven. To have an opinion, to express an opinion, and at least you got it out there, right? They may not agree with you, they may say no, but at least you expressed your opinion, that you are a thinking human being and you do have ideas. And I think we need to get those ideas out there. Especially if we're now thinking creatively, if we're thinking from a new perspective. So we need to be that girl on the right. We need to look at that bar and say, okay, I'm just not going to hang on it with my hands. I'm going to hang on it with my knees, right? I'm going to be different, right? It may not be what you want from me in the moment, but I'm expressing some creativity here, and I'm looking at these issues from a different perspective. So, I have another song, and if we have time, can I do it? All right. This one I wrote, as you will tell. That's my gig hat. That's my gig hat. I'll use the harmonica, then it will be a true folk song. And I don't have it memorized, so I'm looking at some words, but that's okay. This is called Research and Philanthropy. Anybody know Todd Snyder? No? Well, this is kind of a Todd Snyder way of doing it. Well, Apra asked me to talk about where we're going to be 10 years down the road in research and philanthropy. It's a place we got to get to. It's a place we're going to be 10 years down the road, research and philanthropy. So I reached out to some old colleagues and I asked them where we're going to be, what we're going to look like, what we're going to see. Some said they didn't have a clue. Some said it's not going to be me. Some seemed that didn't even care. about research and philanthropy. Well, that ain't gonna cut it. Peter Wiley will tell you that. He said, "Hey, friend, don't you know," this is Peter Wiley talking, "you better give a crap. You better get your stuff together. You better have a map. For the times they are changing in research and philanthropy." Hey, hey, wouldn't you say that 10 years is a mighty long way, singing hey, 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 hey. Okay, got to scroll to the top. There you go. Well, you got your blackbaud and advisor. You got donor search, you see. And for those on limited budgets, you got R, and it's free. You got professional ethics, social media, and donor privacy. You got rapid insight and GG&A, and the Chronicle of Philanthropy. You got webcasts and podcasts. And you got Apra chapters, and they're awesome. You got prospect management. And don't forget about David Lawson. You got strategic partners. Big shops, little shops, all with urgent needs. We're the drivers and we're the source. We're the future of research and philanthropy. Well, Apra asked me to talk about where we're going to be 10 years down the road in research and philanthropy. Well, all I got is this song, and I don't have a clue. But my daddy always said, you better tame the horse before the horse tames you. Hey, hey, wouldn't you say that 10 years is quite a long way, singing hey, 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 hey. Hey, hey, wouldn't you say that 10 years is quite a long way, singing hey, 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 hey. Thank you.
Okay, so if this is the official David Robertson fan club here, I'd like to join. Many thanks to David, and thanks to all of our Apra Talk speakers this morning. It's now time to break into the roundtable discussions and discuss the topics related to this morning's presentations. You will have a little less than 30 minutes to discuss amongst yourself. I will come back at the end for a quick wrap-up. Enjoy your roundtable discussions.